Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is part 3 of my review of Raised by Wolves. I liked the first 2 episodes, and the following 2 episodes kind of bored me, so I became disappointed and became pessimistic about the show, but the following episodes I watched 3 more, and they were much better. The pacing got better, it started getting more interesting again, it started being more complicated. There were a lot of action scenes and a lot of special effects, and my favorite moments were all those artistic scenes. There were all kind of bizarre images and all of that. Those who saw the episode probably know what I mean. There was a specific scene which I thought was simply done very well visually, stylistically, artistically, and all of that, so that gave the show a lot of points. And in general, there's a lot of stuff in the show which some of it I don't even like, but I still appreciate artistic symbolism and that kind of stuff, so I do like it. And also the show did start to deal with the actual topics of, religion versus atheism and all of that, which was kind of lacking in the beginning. At first they only mentioned that as kind of the background for this whole story, but they didn't really delve into the issues themselves. And yet finally we get to see some kind of intellectual debates and clashes about the issues themselves, and so I did like that, even though it still is not as good as it could have been, in my opinion. I think some of it is kind of too simplistic and too one-sided and not as intellectual as I would like it to be. And for example, those religious people who came from that ark, that spaceship which is called the Ark, that brought them to this planet from Earth, and obviously the technology level is advanced, and so I would expect humanity in the future, if it reached that kind of technological level, that people would be smarter. And yet those people we see, especially on the religious side, seem to be almost as primitive as the people in ancient times, the Crusades and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think even modern day people would be that way, and definitely not ones from an advanced society in the future. So I simply cannot buy it that they're thinking in that way. They're kind of way too simplistic and primitive in their way of thinking, and so that kind of annoys me. And I'm still not sure what the show's message is. I guess it doesn't really have any one-sided message. It's kind of trying to show both sides are idiots. Basically, that's how I interpret it, that both sides have their negatives, and basically everybody on all the sides are idiots. And that's something I don't like. I would rather watch a show in which all the people on every side would be smarter, and maybe in some scenes we would have an actual interesting intellectual clashes talking about issues which are very philosophical and which don't have a straight answer. And yet the conflicts we do see are very simplistic, arguing over, do animals have souls or not? Like that kid has a mouse and the mouse died, and then they bury it, and he says he doesn't have a soul, and yet he cares for it. Kind of very simplistic level debates about religion and that kind of stuff, and they don't really deal with any hard topics, in my opinion. Like, maybe it's simply because I personally watch so many debates on these issues, and so the kind of stuff they deal with in this show is kind of, to me, seems simplistic, and they didn't yet touch upon more complicated topics. Now, of course, this is a TV show. I don't expect this to become a debate of just people sitting around a table and debating some kind of complicated issue. They don't have the time for that, I guess, and so they only do that a little bit, and that's okay. But it is still kind of disappointing to me. And also, as I said, they showed religious people as kind of idiots who just blindly believe all kinds of nonsense, and it's so easy to manipulate them and to trick them. And at the same time, the atheist colony is also kind of stupid. First of all, the mother character keeps trying to educate the children to become atheists. How does she do that? Like, we don't really get any direct examples. Like, if we saw a scene of her explaining why religion is wrong or something, but we don't. She basically forces them to be atheists. She simply says to them, we are atheists and you have to be atheists, and that's it. So she's basically a dictator, and she's dictating that. And I find that whole idea kind of silly. Like, that's not how it works. How can you control a person's inner beliefs simply by imposing rules on them? It doesn't really work. And it's the same flaw, it's the same mistake that religion did historically, that it always forced people to believe, which we can argue about how much it was effective or not, but a lot of people, I'm sure, across history were not really believers. They were simply pretending to be in order to fit in their society and to avoid punishment and all of that. But you don't really get to them for real unless you convince them intellectually, rationally, and get them to really believe that. If you just force it on them, it won't always work, in my opinion. And also, the character of Mother basically forgets that she kidnapped those kids who were indoctrinated into the religion previously, so they believe a certain religion, and yet she doesn't really do anything to challenge that. She simply forces it on them. No, you're atheists now, and because I said so, and that's it. So basically, she's just as bad as all the religious authority figures who force their religion. And so, is the show trying to say there's the same problem on both sides, that atheism is just as guilty as religion, and also they were supposed to be raised as pacifists, and yet they have to resort to violence because they're starving, so they have to kill those creatures and all of that. So is the show trying to equate the two groups and basically show that they're both as bad as each other? And also there's a lot of silly moments that don't really make any sense. For example, they said in several episodes, they said that both sides were killing the children of the other side, even babies of the other side. And it makes no sense to me, because aren't all babies born atheists? And so why do they kill atheist babies because they're born to atheist parents? Like, why not take those kids and then turn them religious? And later in the show they are able to do that. Apparently they try to do that with that kid, to convert him to their religion, to baptize him, and so that is possible. And so if that is possible according to their religion, why didn't they do that previously? And at the same episode, they also said that those other kids who died previously, they had no souls because they are atheists. And so do they think that only when someone turns into their religion, that's when he gets a soul? And so it doesn't really make sense. The whole religion, the way they show it, it seems way too primitive, in my opinion. I think it would have been more interesting to show them as religious people who are more advanced than the ones of today, who have some better arguments and who have some more common sense and maybe have actual evidence on their side. You know, this is a fantasy story. They could add all kinds of supernatural elements, which maybe later they will explain with technology or something. They do have something like that here that I am hoping they're going to explain it, or at least make it ambiguous and not one-sided. I'll get to that later. But the whole way they show the religious people, they're just as primitive as the ones centuries from before now. And yet centuries in the future, they're going to be just as stupid. So I don't really buy that, and it annoys me. And it makes no sense internally. So one episode they say that Mother Robot was originally built by the religious side, and she was killing atheists, including atheist children, and some guy reprograms her to be on the other side, and then as a test he gives her a baby, and she cuddles that baby, but once he says that baby was born to atheist parents, suddenly she snaps the baby's neck, and then it turns out it was a robot baby. It was a test to see what she'll do. But that doesn't make any sense. This is a baby, so aren't all babies atheists? And so why is she killing a baby just because it's not religious yet? So it makes no sense. It boggles my mind. And also in other episodes, whenever they talk about the war back on Earth, the war between the religious and the atheists, and they say that a lot of atheists were suicide bombers and were blowing themselves up to kill the religious people, and that makes absolutely no sense, because this is the kind of tactic that I think would be used mostly by religious people, not by atheists. Because, it's a lot easier to convince a religious person to sacrifice himself than it would be to an atheist, because a religious person will think that he's not really dying, that he's going to paradise or whatever, he's going to get a reward. But an atheist who doesn't believe in an afterlife, I think, would not be so willing to end his own life, even if it's to accomplish some greater mission. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. I do think in all kinds of wars, when hatred is so fanatical, and if you have nothing to lose, if your life sucks, maybe it would be possible for anyone to do that, but I think it's much more likely for religious people to do that than to atheists. So I don't get why they decided to do kind of a role reversal on that whole issue. So this show seems to be trying to equate both sides, to say they're as bad as each other, that radical atheism is just as bad as religion, is just as tyrannical, that they have to be raised to be atheist by force, basically, by a set of rules, and that there were suicide bombers back in the war, the atheist ones were. And so I don't think it really makes sense. It's almost insulting to my intelligence, because if you look back at history, there's a reason why those things were happening under the rule of religion and not under the rule of secular societies, which kind of stopped all that nasty stuff. And as I said previously, I think it would be much more likely that a religious person will be the one willing to commit suicide to kill his enemy, rather than an atheist who knows that it's his only life. Why would he sacrifice it? I'm not saying it's not possible, of course, to save your family or your nation. Of course, some soldiers who are not religious would also sacrifice themselves and all of that, but it feels like they wanted to do it simply to create this false equation between the two sides to say that both of them are bad, basically, and also both of them are killing the children of the other side, and it makes no sense. If this whole war was about religion, then wouldn't you want to convert the other side? Why would you try to kill all the children of the other side? Unless it's some sort of racist thing. Maybe that's the allegory they wanted, but you know, if this was a war between races, or some kind of deeper hatred for someone's DNA that is different from yours, then it would make sense why in that war you would want to totally destroy the other side. But if it's all about religion, then you would want to convert the other side, not kill them. And so that whole backstory about the war doesn't really make sense in their details, and they're basically repeating the same mistake. So now they're all fighting each other on this planet, even though apparently they're barely able to survive, like they just barely can find enough food, and yet they still kind of fight each other. So why not put all the differences aside until you can survive on this planet first? It kind of boggles my mind, especially when there are so little humans left, apparently, and yet they still fight over the dominance of whose religion or lack of religion is the right one. And so it kind of annoys me. Like, I don't think people in this situation would be so unwilling to compromise. Like, why not join forces? Maybe that's how it will end. And it brings me to that character who took over the religious side, even though he wasn't from their side originally. He changed his face simply to escape Earth on their ship, and he now pretends to be religious, and he manages to take over their group. And even though he's an atheist inside, but he starts to hear voices, so now he's a believer maybe. And so all of that is such a mess, and it's not yet explained. I only watched 7 episodes, and it was not yet explained why is he hearing voices. Is he simply crazy? Is that God real, or is there some kind of technological explanation? Maybe some sort of hologram AI affecting him, you know, just like that hologram of the one who reprogrammed Mother. He seemed to be aware of some of this stuff happening, and he seems to have some sort of remote connection with her. So maybe some sort of AI hologram program or whatever is affecting that guy as well. Maybe that's what we'll find out later. For now, it's all very ambiguous, and I like that. I like the fact that there's a lot of possibilities, like they mentioned that prophecy of the savior, and we have a few characters who are potentially that character, like the 2 different kids, and also that character of the one who changed his face. They are all orphans, and they are all technically fitting that prophecy, and so I do kind of become curious what will be in the end, and maybe they will keep it ambiguous even up until the end with a lot of different possibilities, and it will be left for the audience to decide. And if it's done well, that might be good, but I hope they will at least show the option of some kind of rational technological explanation for what's going on, which so far we didn't see until episode 7. So I do think the show became more interesting, but it's still disappointing, especially on the intellectual level. Like that whole thing with religion versus atheism is not really done that well in my opinion. It could have been more interesting. It seems kind of simplistic, and just everybody are basically idiots, and I prefer clever characters. And I do like that one who changed his face, because he is the clever character, maybe the cleverest one in the whole show, and he's also very conflicted and complicated character. He doesn't know which side to believe basically, and all of that, so he's kind of in the middle, and that is interesting. And so he's probably the most interesting character. And the character of that kid who is self-righteous and all of that, I kind of like him, but he's sometimes annoying as well. Like, he's kind of too naive and all of that, and he's also kind of conflicted and complicated, because he's not he was raised atheist, but he's really not. He believes in all kinds of spirits and stuff, and he thinks all animals and even plants have souls and all that kind of stuff, which he got from nowhere. He just decided that way. And hopefully in the future we'll get some more scenes of more interesting dialogue and more interesting debates between the various characters on different sides, and maybe even reach some kind of compromise, a solution, and temporary truce between the enemies in order to survive as the last of humanity, to protect themselves maybe against a common enemy who will show up. So I am curious to see where this is going, so I will do another review after the season final, and I'll review the last episodes, and I will give my overall thoughts on the whole season. So that will be my next review of this show. So that's it for now. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it in the comment section below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.